It wasn't a billion, it was about $155,000. That's making news as of yesterday and as of this morning. And Tony Daunt from the Michigan Freedom Fund is on our AT&T line right now, and he wants to know more about that money and the conditions that went with it. And I'll let you set the table for us, Tony Daunt. What happened?
Well, I'm going to first start with some words of a public official from January 3rd, 2019, just a few days into their term of office. They stated in a widely hailed press release, state government must be open, transparent, and accountable to Michigan taxpayers. To continue to earn public confidence, we must set good examples and act ethically at all times. Will come as no surprise that those words are from Governor Gretchen Whitmer. And now, as you've pointed out, they're not just the deal with former DHS Director Robert Gordon for $155,000, buying his silence for his term as the director. There was also late in the day report that the former director of the Unemployment Insurance Agency, Stephen Gray, was paid $85,000 in a similar agreement, purchasing his confidentiality and silence. And I can't think of anything that flies more in the face of that statement I read just earlier than this type of behavior and the resistance and kind of, blatant disregard for questions regarding it.
Isn't the first question that somebody asks when they hear that the Director of Health and Human Services got $155,000 to go away and stay quiet, what does he have to hide?
Yes, absolutely, and I think that's a very fair question. Generally, these types of agreements may be, somewhat commonplace or not entirely out of order in the public sector when you've got two private entities, whether through lawsuit or employment separation, wanting to protect their interests. But this is public service. This is the use of taxpayer dollars, and when these people are being paid for confidentiality, not just the aspect of a golden parachute for them for leaving, which is a different issue. This is asking for demanding their silence among the two parties, and that's unacceptable when it comes to public government, when it comes to public tax dollars, and when it comes from somebody who has made a huge public show of the importance of transparency and ethics and is doing nothing to live up to those words.
Is it fair to assume that Director Gordon, Health and Human Services Director, left in an unpleasant fashion between himself and the governor, or is that wild speculation?
I think, given the circumstances that of how it was announced that he left back, however long ago it was now, I seem to lose track of time, but a month or so ago, whenever it was, where it was, he just kind of all of a sudden announced he was leaving, and an hour later there was a replacement named. That was certainly a big sign, and now this coming out and this coming to light, and the refusal of the former director and the Whitmer administration, the governor herself, to release the terms of this and put this behind them certainly points to a fire. There's smoke, the building's warm now. Where's the fire?
He quit or was shown the door on the day that the governor decided to reopen restaurants for indoor dining to the level of 25% capacity. Do you think that he quit in protest of that?
It's tough to tell. That's the whole issue and the problem with how this governor and this administration have handled this response to the COVID pandemic and their lack of transparency about the so-called science and data that they're using. It appears that the only science they're using is political science, and it calls into question their decisions. It makes this type of arrangement highly suspicious and makes the public rightfully skeptical. And I hope the legislature will handle this appropriately and seriously and dig into it and get to the bottom of it, because taxpayers deserve to know where this money's going and why it's purchasing these individuals' silence.
Is the Michigan Freedom Fund going to take any sort of action to demand to see that agreement?
Well, we certainly put out a press release yesterday pointing out some questions that should be asked. I think demanding that the information regarding this agreement come to light. Not sure, how we'll handle it now. I think the legislature is in a good spot to do their work, and we certainly seek to support them.
You don't need a lawsuit or a Freedom of Information Act sort of deal?
Certainly that would, doesn't hurt to put those forward. But, with the confidentiality agreement, I'm sure the governor, her team would say, oh, well, this isn't subject to FOIA. So, in many ways, it may be a waste of time. But I'm sure others are digging into it, and we certainly intend to do so as well.
Boy, it's intriguing. And it's just always the adage that the cover-up is worse than the crime, isn't it? Not that there's a crime committed necessarily, but, I mean, I guess the way that it all came down made it suspicious. And then to hear that there was an agreement made and money paid makes it even more suspicious.
Absolutely. And I think the fact that when the first one of Gordon came to light, when the reporter Craig Mauger from Detroit News asked, are there any others that are, out there? He was told, file a FOIA. I mean, how ridiculous is that? Just be up front with the information and don't make people dig around for what was already out there.
That's not a yes and it's not a no, but it sounds like a yes.
Absolutely. And I think that's how the agreement for Stephen Gray came to light. And so, it begs the question, what other ones are out there? Do we have to ask by name? Or are they just going to be up front and finally do their job of being transparent and tell us all of these agreements that exist and why they exist?
50% capacity in restaurants and a bunch of other caveats for different businesses were trotted out yesterday. On the same day this news came to light, I could be very pessimistic or very, cynical and say, they had to do something to take the eye off the ball a little bit. Do you think the two had anything to do with each other?
Again, it's one of those things, I consider myself, the Irish in me is cynical and pessimistic, and I'm inclined to think that way already, but this certainly heightens suspicion to that fact. And it's unfortunate. It is drawing a deep amount of suspicion into this government and what the response to COVID has been and why it has been. And it just undermines any efforts that we need to take to continue protecting ourselves. It makes people say, well, if they're lying about this, they're not being upfront about this issue, about the transparency of these officials. What else are they saying that's bupkis? And I'm going to tune it all out.
Tony Daunt, director of the Michigan Freedom Fund. You can learn more. Just Google Michigan Freedom Fund, and you can get an email every Friday to Front Lines of Freedom that talk about these very issues, and it doesn't cost a thing. Thank you, sir.